What if I told you the very thing you call laziness isn't laziness at all? What if every time you've promised yourself, this week will be different, only to slip back into the same tired patterns? You weren't failing, but actually being trapped by something much older, much deeper than motivation or discipline. Stay with me through this video, and you won't just hear another pep talk. You'll discover the hidden machinery inside your own mind, the one most people never see, the one Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to bring into the light. And at the end, I'll give you the step-by-step blueprint for turning your ambition into real, lasting movement. Not hype, not another grind harder mantra. A practical map out of the cycle you've been stuck in for years. You know the feeling. You scroll online and see someone your age, maybe even younger, crushing it, building something, transforming their life. And you think, I have the same ideas. I even have more ambition than they do. So why am I still stuck here? You make plans. You daydream. You tell yourself tomorrow, next week, or after this stressful period, you'll finally start. But when the moment comes, something invisible pulls you back. Society gives this invisible wall a simple name: laziness. But Jung would laugh at that word. Jung believed laziness isn't a flaw, or weakness, or a lack of energy. It's a mask, a disguise for something living in the depths of your psyche, something he called the shadow. The shadow isn't your enemy. It isn't evil, but it is cunning. It holds every fear, doubt, insecurity, and painful memory you've tried to bury. And here's the paradox. The bigger your ambition, the bigger your shadow becomes. Because every time you imagine a life beyond the one you're living, your shadow senses danger. Its job is to protect you, not to help you grow, but to keep you safe, small, and predictable. So when you dare to dream, the shadow gets to work. Suddenly you're tired, distracted, anxious. Your brain invents clever reasons to wait until later. Every step forward feels like you're dragging 100 pounds of invisible weight. Have you ever promised yourself to wake up early, only to hit snooze and convince yourself, I'll start fresh tomorrow? That wasn't weakness. That was your shadow, winning the tug of war against your ambition. And unless you see what's happening, you will always lose. That's why you can binge motivation videos for hours, flood your brain with quotes and affirmations, and still not take a single step forward. Because motivation isn't the cure. In fact, and Jung would argue this fiercely, motivation is actually fuel for the shadow's fire. Think about it. Each time you hype yourself up, promising this time will be different, and then you fall short, what happens? You collapse into shame. You call yourself lazy. You spiral. And in that moment, your shadow whispers, see? I told you it would never work. That disappointment strengthens it. It learns that all it has to do is wait, because the cycle of hype and collapse always feeds it in the end. Let's map it out clearly. You get inspired, you set a bold goal, change your career, build your body, start that business. At first, the energy is electric. You tell your friends, you make plans. But then, the days pass. Doubt creeps in. You tell yourself you'll start once you've researched a little more, once things calm down, once you're ready. A week goes by, a month. Your motivation fades. You feel like a failure. So you chase a new spark of hype, a new video, a new book, a new secret, and the cycle repeats. Here's the truth. It's not that you lack discipline. It's that you've never confronted the part of yourself that is terrified of what will happen if you actually succeed. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again. Every time you've said, "That's just the way I am," that wasn't fate. That was your shadow writing your story, while you believed you had no choice. Fate isn't final. Fate is just the name we give to patterns we haven't understood yet. Here's the cruel trick. Your shadow doesn't just sit quietly in the dark. It shapes your personality. It chooses your excuses. It whispers your self-doubt. It even disguises itself as logic and common sense. Imagine this. You decide you're finally going to write that book, launch that channel, or start that side business. At first you feel excited, but then the voice comes. Now's not a good time. You don't have the right equipment. What if people laugh at you? Shouldn't you wait until you're more prepared? That voice feels reasonable, but Jung would tell you it isn't reason. It's fear, disguised as wisdom. Your shadow isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to protect you. Because success, real success, requires transformation. And transformation feels like death to the part of you that only knows survival. So your shadow sabotages you before you can even begin. It convinces you that doing nothing is safer than risking everything. Think about your comfort zone. It's not comfortable because it's fulfilling, it's comfortable because it's familiar. The shadow thrives in that familiarity. It doesn't care if you're miserable, as long as you're predictable. That's why so many people live the same year on repeat and call it a life. Here's where Jung was ruthless. He said the shadow will never go away. You can't destroy it. You can't out-discipline it. You can't think positive it into silence. The shadow is permanent. The only question is, will you let it control you, or will you learn to control it? Jung once worked with a man who felt trapped in a cycle of procrastination. He dreamed of becoming a painter but never started. Every time he set up his canvas, the shadow whispered, "You're not good enough. Everyone will laugh. You'll embarrass yourself." So instead of painting, he read about painting. He talked about painting. He bought supplies, but the canvas stayed blank. Sound familiar? Jung didn't tell him to push harder. He didn't say, "Just start." Instead, he asked him to confront the fear directly. To close his eyes, imagine picking up the brush, and then notice the wave of panic rising inside. "Don't fight it," Jung said. "Face it. Speak to it. What does the fear want to protect you from?" When the man did this, he realized the truth. He wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of being seen trying. That's the power of the shadow. It doesn't attack your goals directly. It attacks your identity. It says, if you fail, you'll be humiliated. If you succeed, you'll be exposed. Better to stay invisible. And so, millions of people never begin. Not because they lack ambition, but because they're secretly terrified of becoming who they're meant to be. Maybe you've noticed this in others. That friend who always talks about what they could do but never makes a move. That coworker who dreams of leaving their job but stays for 10 more years. They're not lazy. They're not unmotivated. They're prisoners of their shadow. And until they confront it, the cycle will never break. If you've been nodding your head, recognizing yourself in this, don't beat yourself up. You're not broken. You're not weak. In fact, the fact that you feel this tug of war proves something. It means you have ambition. You have potential. And the bigger the shadow fights back, the more certain it is that you're standing on the edge of transformation. So what do? Jung's answer was radical. He said, don't fight the shadow. Don't deny it. Integrate it. In other words, the way out is not to crush your fears, but to befriend them, to understand why they exist, and to use that energy as fuel instead of resistance. And in the next section, I'll show you exactly how to do that. Here's the biggest mistake most people make. They try to get rid of their shadow. They double down on discipline. They drown themselves in positive affirmations. They treat fear like an enemy to be destroyed. But Jung warned, whatever you resist grows stronger. The more you fight your shadow, the more it digs in its heels. The first step to integration is brutally simple, but most people never do it. You must name the fear. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid will happen if I succeed? What would change? Who might reject me? What identity would I have to let go of? Write it down. Don't just think it. Put it on paper where you can see it, because the moment you drag fear out of the dark and give it words, it loses half its power. Next, watch how the shadow disguises itself. It never says, don't chase your dreams. Instead, it says, I'll start once I have more time. I need the perfect plan first. After this busy season, I'll focus. Excuses sound responsible, but when you notice them repeating, you'll see the truth. They're just costumes your shadow wears to keep you trapped. Here's where Jung was radical. He suggested you make a pact with your shadow. Instead of saying, "I'll never be afraid again," you say, "Yes, I am afraid, and I'm moving forward anyway." Your shadow doesn't vanish. It walks beside you. It whispers doubts. But you stop treating those doubts as commands. You reclaim the driver's seat. Think about public speaking. Some people wait years, even decades, hoping to overcome their fear before stepping on stage. But the people who thrive don't overcome fear. They accept it. They feel their hands shake, their heart race, and they walk on stage anyway. The shadow doesn't disappear. It just loses its ability to paralyze. And here's the shocking part. After enough practice, the very energy of fear transforms into fuel. What once felt like panic begins to feel like power. Another trick Jung hinted at: don't fight your shadow on a massive battlefield. Start small. Instead of saying, "I'll write a 300-page book," tell your shadow, "I'm only writing one messy paragraph today." Instead of, "I'll get in shape this year," say, "I'm just doing 5 push-ups right now." The shadow hates transformation, but it barely notices tiny steps. And those tiny steps, repeated daily, bypass its defenses completely. Finally, make action a ritual, not a decision. Why? Because decisions give the shadow room to argue. Every morning when you decide, "Should I work on my project today?" the shadow has a chance to negotiate. But rituals are different. If brushing your teeth is a ritual, you don't debate it every night, you just do it. If writing, exercising, or building is a ritual, the shadow never gets to vote. Here's the paradox. Once you integrate the shadow, it becomes your ally. The same fear that once paralyzed you now becomes your signal. When you feel resistance, it means you found something important. The bigger the fear, the more it points toward growth. So instead of avoiding resistance, you learn to chase it. Because every time the shadow flinches, it's showing you exactly where your transformation lies. So here's your blueprint. Name the fear. Observe the excuses. Make a pact with your shadow. Shrink the battlefield. Ritualize action. Do this, and laziness stops being a curse. It becomes a compass, pointing you directly toward the next mountain you're meant to climb. By now you see it clearly. Your so-called laziness isn't a flaw. It's the mask your shadow wears to keep you safe. But here's the bigger truth. This isn't just about productivity. It's about destiny. Because every time you avoid confronting your shadow, you're not just delaying a project, you're postponing your life. Nietzsche had a brutal way of putting this. He said, "Become who you are." Sounds simple, but he wasn't being poetic. He meant that life demands transformation, that every one of us has the duty to grow into the person we're capable of becoming, or risk rotting in place. And guess what? Your shadow is the barrier standing in the way of that transformation. Nietzsche spoke about the will to power, not just the will to survive, but the inner drive to expand, to create, to overcome. When you feel ambition, that's your will to power calling. But when you stall, when you procrastinate, when you sink into distraction, that's not laziness. That's your shadow wrestling with your will to power, trying to chain it back down into safety. Every human life becomes a battleground between these two forces. The Stoics saw this struggle too. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." The shadow wants you to stay safe, but safety is just a slower kind of death. The Stoics believed that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. In other words, they were teaching shadow integration centuries before Jung gave it a name. Here's the twist. The shadow isn't just an obstacle. It's also your teacher. Think about it. If your shadow reveals your deepest fears, then it also reveals your deepest calling. Afraid of speaking? Maybe your voice matters more than you realize. Afraid of failure? Maybe you're meant to attempt something massive. Afraid of being seen? Maybe visibility is your destiny. The shadow points to the very thing you're meant to do. Look at the people you admired today. Artists, entrepreneurs, thinkers. Almost all of them began by confronting a shadow. J.K. Rowling faced poverty and self-doubt. Steve Jobs was terrified of rejection. Nietzsche himself battled illness, loneliness, and despair. But they didn't wait to overcome fear. They acted alongside it. And in doing so, they transformed their shadows into fuel. So yes, confronting the shadow will make you more productive. Yes, it will help you break the cycle of procrastination. But the deeper payoff is this. You begin to live a life that feels authentic. No more masks, no more excuses. Just you, fully expressed, fully alive, becoming who you were always meant to be. So let's make this concrete. Here's the practice I want you to adopt. Each morning, write down the task you're most avoiding. Ask yourself, what shadow is hiding here? What fear am I protecting myself from? Shrink the battlefield. Commit to just one tiny action. Treat fear as a compass. If it scares you, it matters. Ritualize it. Do it at the same time every day without negotiation. Follow this, and in weeks you'll notice a shift. In months you'll see momentum. In years you won't even recognize the person you used to be. So here's my challenge to you. Next time you hear yourself say, "I'm just lazy," stop. Look deeper. Ask, what is my shadow trying to protect me from? What am I afraid of becoming? Because on the other side of that fear is the life you've been